This next session I'm very excited about. Obviously, climate change has been a big topic recently and also at the UN General Assembly. And it's nice to be able to bring that topic square into the focus of inclusive business as well. And we happen to have some great speakers lined up for you. The format of the next session will be first a presentation, and then we're going to have a set of panelists come join us on the stage. So first I'd like to introduce Dr. Stuart Hart, who has already chaired a session this morning if you were here for the first session in the morning. He's the Grossman Endowed Chair in Sustainable Business at the University of Vermont Business School and the S.C. Johnson Chair Emeritus at Cornell University Johnson School of Management. He's one of the world's leading authorities on the implications of environment and poverty on business strategy. Please help me welcome Dr. Stuart Hart.
Well, happy late morning. So here's what we're going to try to do. I'll offer up some, at least some context setting comments here for maybe 15, 20 minutes on the topic of the day, which is this cacophony of climate change, inclusive business and poverty and so forth. It's like a jumble of which one of these things don't go together. And we'll try to make sense of all that because we think it's really important that they go together. And then after that, we'll have three ventures that we'll hear from that are in this space, centrally in this space. We'll have some conversation around those, then an opportunity for all of you to participate a bit, and finally some observations and closing comments from Liz, from the DFID perspective. So that's sort of the lay of the land of what we'll try to do, if that makes sense. But let me start with maybe a little bit of context setting. And I always like to start with a question, which is, what's the likelihood the next 20 years look like the last 20 years? What's the likelihood that the next 20 years are a linear extrapolation of the last 20? What do you think? Zero. I hear a lot of zeros. It's probably a safe bet that the probability is zero, right? Probably a safe bet. And this goes, how many of you were here for the breakfast session this morning that we did on the MG? So, I almost think about it like looking backwards over the last 15, 20 years, kind of the MDG era. That's not going to repeat itself, right? Looking out over the next 15, 20 years, which we think of as the SDG era. And there are a lot of good reasons for that. And I think this is especially true for enterprise, for commerce, for business, for entrepreneurship. And it leads us to, I think, to the conclusion there are really two levels of, when we hear the term sustainability, kind of a big buzzword, right? And it means a lot of different things to different people. But I think we can simplify this to kind of two primary constructs around sustainability. There's one form of sustainability which I would say was more reflective of the MDG era from a business point of view, which I've called greening, which focuses on, this is the being less bad part, right? How do we incrementally reduce negative impact in today's businesses and today's products and processes, working with existing supply chains and existing stakeholders that have a say around the core business, because it's enormously important that we make sure we have right to operate, right? That's really the name of the game. The characteristic is that it tends to be incremental change. That doesn't make it bad, right? It just means, we'll reduce energy use by 20% and water use by 20% and greenhouse gases. So all good, right? And with corporate reports, with the charts going down, so that's all good stuff. But it probably doesn't move us toward a sustainable world, right? Especially as we look out over the next 20 years, where expansion of the global economy, emergence of the developing world is going to swamp these sort of incremental improvements from a greening point of view. Which leads us then to the second variety of sustainability, which I've called beyond greening, but we can call it anything we like. The concept is what's important. The beyond greening construct of sustainability is all about what comes next, right? It's about emerging or tomorrow's technologies that are leapfrog, that are disruptive, that are inherently clean and sustainable, that will make obsolete what we're continuously improving in the greening category. It's about new markets, maybe even creating markets that don't yet exist. It's about new partners that have been on the fringe or have been excluded. It's about unmet needs. Right? It's about a different stakeholder set. We can think of it as fringe stakeholders as opposed to core stakeholders. And how do we tap into that as a source of competitive imagination for new businesses? It's about entrepreneurship. It's therefore about discontinuity, not about continuous improvement. It's Schumpeterian, right? It's about creative destruction. It's a completely different game than the greening game. And we will see industries restructured in a fundamental way, I believe, over the next 20 years, and the creation of entirely new industries that don't yet exist. I think that's what the next 20 years look like. That's why it won't be anything like the last 20 years. And so to me, this is where the action is, this right-hand side, the Beyond Greening agenda. And I think there's some fundamental reasons for this. I don't know what's going on in the world, if you think in terms of what are the broad dynamics in the world that are driving it, especially from a business point of view. If we think about the global pyramid, at the very tippy top of the pyramid is all of us, right? The 800 million or so wealthy people that business historically has focused on. For good reason, because that's where the money is, right? I mean, it makes perfectly good sense that that's where business would focus its attention. Same reason people rob banks, that's where the money is. So it makes very good sense that for as long as we can remember, that's what the focus of business was all about, primarily, right? But I think all of us in the room know that over the last 20, 30, 40 years, yes, we're creating more rich people, especially in places like China and India and other places, but not at a rapid enough pace to fuel the growth objectives that global companies have. So as the top of the pyramid has become increasingly saturated, it's driven us to look to the rising middle classes. This is what we think of as the emerging market space. And for the past 20, 30 years, this is really what's driven growth. And I think everyone in the room knows that. It's kind of obvious. And it's not a bad thing, from the standpoint of driving functionality and making products and services available to a lot more people, improving lives of people. And, close to 2 billion people have joined the middle class in the last 20, 30, 40 years. That's not bad at all, right? The problem is we're sort of getting to the end of that era, I think, that what we would think of as kind of the first generation of global economic globalization. And there are a couple of reasons. One is that we've tended to take the model, both the product technology and business model that existed at the top and just move it down, right? We're going to take some cost out of it. We'll adapt products for local cultural tastes and so forth. And that's been successful, quite successful, and it's what's driven, the emerging market growth over the last 20 or 30 years. But I think we're now reaching the point where that just doesn't really have much energy left in it. You can only strip so much cost out of existing production systems and only adapt products so much before they simply can't be taken down any further. They're no longer directly relevant in many cases. So that's reason number one, you begin to bump into cost barriers. Reason number two is that as we take those systems that were designed at the top, maybe 30, 40, 50, or 100 years ago, they tend to be somewhat resource intensive, although that's improving. They tend to be somewhat linear. They're based on take, make, waste. And when you now multiply that by 4 in the emerging economies, then we begin to see the obvious environmental tipping points that we all experience wherever we go, right? So I think we're bumping up against the limits of this strategy as a way of trying to bring prosperity to the whole world, because we still have the 4.5 billion at the base of the income pyramid who have either been ignored, poorly served, underserved, actively exploited, you name it, right? That's been the pattern so far. And the only way, if we think of this in business terms, to get there, in my view, is through new technologies. This is the opportunity to do the beyond greening thing I just talked about. Technologies that leapfrog, because in order to lift those 4.5 billion people and generate livelihoods and the economic growth that we're going to need fundamentally different technology, right? Or else we're going to swamp the natural capitals that we all depend on. And in order to do that, it's going to take fundamentally different products, different business models, and different business processes, approaches to business development from the ground up, which means new skills and capabilities and new strategies, right, for companies. To me, this is our topic for the rest of the session this morning. And then, of course, we know there's always the prospect that if we're able to incubate these new strategies and business concepts, some of them have the potential to trickle up, right? So this is the notion of reverse innovation, right? That is there, maybe it's overstated, but I think it's real at the same time. And I don't know that we'll have a lot of time to talk about that, but I think that's part of the system of the great leap to the base with the opportunity to trickle up, right? So, a while back, C.K. Prahalad and I, who, many of you know, or at least you know his work, he passed away a few years back. We wrote this piece called The Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid. And, I think that's generated a fair amount of energy around this idea. It's also generated a fair amount of criticism, right? That this is just about kind of taking money from poor people and selling them subpar products and so forth. But it's been healthy, right? It's generated a lot of healthy debate around all this and how we ought to go about doing it, and it's generated a lot of learning, some of which we want to talk about today. And, for me personally, it's been an interesting journey too. I wrote this book a while back called Capitalism at the Crossroads, where, for me, unless this notion of serving and lifting the base of the pyramid is done in a way that generates livelihoods, number one, and leapfrogs to environmental sustainability, number two, then it's dead on arrival, right? It just can't happen, right? So that's what I've dedicated most of my time for the last decade or more trying to figure out, and it's not an easy nut to crack. If it was easy, we would have done it a long time ago, right? And I wouldn't be standing up here. Because we're, sort of at this point of the narrowing funnel, and you've probably seen this metaphor before, right? That we have on the one side the growing limits, constraints, challenges environmentally, and we had our climate protesters, out here for the past 2 or 3 days in large numbers, and that probably only increases in time, but it's not just about the climate system, it's every natural system, right? Every form of natural capital is under assault as we sit here, right? And that funnel eventually gets to the point where it becomes pretty tough to come back. But we also have a whole set of social challenges. Yeah, population, the rate of growth is slowing. That's good, right? We could actually see the point at which population begins to level off. That's good. But in order to do that, we're going to have to generate livelihoods, standard of living, and economic growth on a scale that, probably 5-fold over what it is now. And then what happens to the top part of the funnel, right? I mean, we're still not there. We still have growing inequality around the world. So there are all kinds of challenges on the social side. And we know that looking back over the last 50 years, the tendency has been environmentally to say we need more regulation, right, or more global conventions. And I'm not arguing that we don't need that. It's just that it hasn't worked so well, right? We've had a few wins, but not as many as we need. So we begin to see storm clouds, kind of existing strategies crashing into the sides of these funnels. And we realize that the trick is finding our way through the neck. This is sort of this to me is the challenge and opportunity around sustainable entrepreneurship, and this is the notion of green leap, right? And so there are two parts to that. First, we can think about, the clean tech revolution. There's a clean tech revolution going on, we're told, right? That we're now upwards of $1 trillion that's been invested in the clean tech space over the last 20 years. And that's good news, right? I mean, I think we should be excited about that. But we haven't yet seen the output of that. There's a lot of input, not so much output, and I think there are a whole set of reasons for that, which we can talk about. But the fact that we begin to see an enterprise and entrepreneurship-driven approach to addressing some of these environmental challenges is really exciting. Because for better or worse, the regulation and the convention approach hasn't gotten us where we need to be. So we should be excited that we see clean tech emerge. Number one. Number two, on the social side of things, we've traditionally thought of this in terms of development, and philanthropy, that sort of thing, development aid and philanthropy, all really important. And of course, we've seen some significant wins on that front, but it hasn't gotten us to where we need to go either, or else we wouldn't be sitting here, right? So the fact that we begin to see a movement around the idea of base of the pyramid now with a burgeoning lexicon, of inclusive business and social entrepreneurship and social business, and we can go on sustainable livelihoods. There are lots and lots of words to describe largely the same idea. But the exciting part of it is that it's all about an enterprise, entrepreneurship, business-driven approach to try to get after these problems. That's exciting. So I think as we sit here today, that's a really good thing. However, whenever you have new initiatives, whenever there's anything new that's introduced in the world, it both solves problems and creates new ones. And to me, one of the new problems that we confront as these two movements, and I would call them kind of the base of the pyramid or the business and poverty movement and the clean tech movement, the big problem now is that they become separate movements. It's like they're two different ecosystems. These people don't talk to each other generally, right? That there's us sitting here, we would probably tilt more toward the base of the pyramid side, but I could go, to fly out to California next week and go to the Clean Tech Ventures Summit, and it's a completely different audience, and they don't know about this meeting, and they're not that interested, because the clean tech tends to be more technology focused. It's a lot of scientists and engineers that just give us the money and we'll develop the technology and somehow it'll magically spring into commercialization, and of course it doesn't, which is one of the reasons we've got $1 trillion in but not so much out yet. We've tended to have less attention, I would say, paid to creative commercialization of next generation leapfrog clean technology. A lot of it just still languishes. We're kind of waiting. The best we can do is, we'll sell it in California or Germany, and then but it never happens. It just doesn't come at the rate we want. And certainly the idea of base of the pyramid when it comes to clean tech has been all but an opposing concept, I would say, until quite recently. I was invited a couple of years back to give the talk at the Clean Tech Venture Summit out in California for precisely this reason, because the typical, what's implanted in most people's mind is that clean tech or, kind of green products in general, that typically connotes an image that it's going to be more expensive, right? I mean, that means it's some premium price thing, that only rich people can afford, but they should do it because it's good for the planet, right? I mean, that's probably still lingering in your head, right? That most of us think, when we hear green products, that's what we think about. But man, we got to somehow banish that from our way of thinking, because if we're going to ever get to a sustainable world, green has to be for everybody, right? It has to become a mass market strategy or else it can't possibly change anything. So the idea of base of the pyramid or thinking in terms of mass market has been a blind spot, I would say, in the clean tech space. And that's a problem. But there's a parallel problem in our world, right, in the BOP space. Very business model focused, which is a good thing, because we need business model innovation for sure, right? And very socially driven, poverty is the driver. That's important too, because it's all about poverty. This is what we're after. But at the same time, there has been a tendency sometimes to give short shrift to environment. Again, for the reasons I've already said, because there's the perception that environment, that's kind of a rich person's problem. But of course it's not, right? I mean, poor people are the ones who are most acutely impacted by the environmental problems we face. So somehow these ideas need to be brought centrally together, which I think is why we're here today. How do we converge these two agendas? That's really the notion behind the Green Leap. How do we create products, services, business models, strategies, ventures, initiatives that bring these two worlds together and make money doing it? Right? That's really the name of the game. So a few years back in 2009, I with some colleagues organized this thing it was here in New York, called the Cornell Global Forum on Sustainable Enterprise. I think Saba was there, and we got some momentum and energy. There were about 100 entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs from around the world that came together, and a number of things got spawned from that, which were pretty exciting. We had this little thing up here, up the road here at the 92nd Street Y with there you can see the least important guy. But then there's Charlie Rose, and of course there's Al Gore, and you know who the two guys on the right are? Yeah, there's Rod and Todd on the far right, and Fisk Johnson, right, who's the CEO of S.C. Johnson, because it's the Johnson School, right? Yeah. So this was an event we did, and it got some, I think it built up some momentum around this, which was exciting. And since then, I think there's a lot that's been going on in terms of generating new ventures. And one of the interesting ventures, I just want to give an example, and then we'll go to the actual, the ventures that are here in the room, that illustrates this. How many people travel to China on a regular basis? Not too many. Of those that travel to China, how many get out of the big cities? A couple. You see these things everywhere, right? They're on the roofs everywhere. So this is glass vacuum tube solar. Right? This is a technology that was invented in China. So They're not knocking it off, right? This was actually came from China. Came out of Tsinghua University, and the initial company that created it was called Tsinghua Solar. And it's interesting because this is a technology that is less than half the cost of traditional flat panel solar. It's made from pretty simple materials like glass. It's basically glass vacuum tubes stuck into a water tank, right, to heat the water with some medium. But it's not like solar panels where you got rare metals and antifreeze and toxics and that sort of thing. So even if you look at it on a life cycle basis, this is not bad to produce, right? And it's less than half the cost. But these guys, because we've been trying to write a case on this for the last 5 years, and we're making headway. But we know enough now, at least, because we spent some time with the leadership in the company, to know how they started. And you can guess how this got out of the starting gate, because this goes back more than 10 years. Their initial reaction was they spun this technology out, they create this product. Where are they going to sell it? They're going to sell it to the rich people in Beijing and Shanghai, right? Because it's a green product, right? That would be the initial thing. So they put all their money, they doubled down on trying to go into the high-end communities in Shanghai and Beijing with this technology. What do you think happened? They almost went bankrupt, right? I mean, it was just a complete non-starter. So almost out of desperation, they went out to the countryside because they were desperate. They didn't really know what to do. And once they got out there, they realized there was huge pent-up need and demand. People did not have regular access to hot water. The grid was just being extended. It was undependable. Natural gas was sporadic in supply. So people would typically be able to bathe maybe once every week. So there's huge pent-up demand and need. And they realized quickly that this is where their opportunity was. So they spent some period of time, probably a couple of years, developing a business model around this, adapted the technology to suit the rural areas and the towns, created a more inclusive business model, created a financing mechanism, engaged local people as sales and service agents, kind of the whole thing you would expect. And this has become the growth generator in this. It's a $1 billion industry just in China now, and there are probably 7 reputable companies in this space and 20 more knockoffs. So, it's nice to know the Chinese knock off their own companies too, right? So that's an important thing. But my point is that this is something that, to me, this is sort of a glimpse of the future, right? These are the sort of ventures, I think, that have transformative capacity. Because this could trickle up too, right? I mean, as time goes on, as this becomes so tested, so bulletproof, so affordable, as fossil fuel prices rise after the fracking era ends and so forth, you could easily imagine this beginning to trickle up. Right? So this is generally, I think, the topic of our conversation today. This is what we want to spend some time on. That to do this, though, is going to take some new skills that if our first attempt with BOP was mostly about taking what we already had and adapting it and trying to sell it into a lower income space where you view the lower income people as either suppliers that you buy from or consumers that you sell to, and you need to do the marketing research to get the right price point and then figure out how you get distribution and take what you've already got and adapt it and work with NGOs. I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I'd say this is what's characterized most what we've called BOP strategy so far. This is sort of an outside-in approach, and it's produced mixed results. In some cases, companies do have their current technology can be applied further down the period. In that case, it's really taken off. Take mobile telephony as an example, right? I mean, and that's driven innovation in that space in a significant way. But in others, it really hasn't worked so well because of the behavioral changes that are required, because of culturally embedded assumptions, a whole range of reasons, affordability, a range of others. So if we think about trying to really get to this next 15 or 20 years, then it's probably some new skills, some new capabilities required. We probably have to think more in terms of co-creation, working with people. This is what Tsinghua Solar ended up doing by default, right? It was actually collaborating with people in the communities that they were serving to change and adapt and redesign product as well as co-create a business model that made sense, that generated livelihoods in the community itself. And that if we figure out how to do this and do it well, we can actually rather than just taking what we've already got and tweaking it, we may be able to take completely uncommercialized clean technologies that have struggled at the top of the pyramid because they're disruptive, and bring them to commercial reality first in the base, right? Where we marry together the capabilities from, companies, corporations, universities, with the knowledge, skills, and capabilities from the bottom up. So this might be the way to incubate new, more environmentally sustainable technologies at the same time we generate livelihoods at the base. So it brings those two worlds together. I think of this as sort of inside-out innovation, right? And that's a different strategy, takes a somewhat different set of skills. So, some of you know this book with Ted London that we did a while back, which tries to get after this, gets at some of these skills for creating mutual value. And, we have this little organization called Enterprise for a Sustainable World. That's what we're dedicated to try to do. And in India, we've created this institute that's focused on the Green Leap. The Emergent Institute, what we want to do is increase the number of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in this space, and have created an innovation ecosystem around it to drive this type of entrepreneurial development, at least starting in India. And then, one of the supporting partners for the event is the BOP Global Network. We started a BOP lab here in the US about 15 years ago, and about 20 now have been spawned around the world, including in Sweden and Denmark and a variety of other places. And we've drawn this together now into a global network, and we held the first global summit last year in Brazil. The next one will be in 2015 here in the US. So if anyone's interested in getting involved in that, let me know. But this is really our point of view in trying to make this work. So whatever's going on there, I'm not sure. Maybe guys in the back there, yeah, something's up. Well, okay, good, thank you. Because I'm pretty much done. The last thing I wanted to just mention, in the spirit of self-promotion, is this new program at the University of Vermont that some of you might be interested in. What we're trying to do essentially is recreate the MBA for the 21st century. Rather than just hanging some electives off the side of the old curriculum, the old core, we started over again. So this is called disruptive innovation, right? So it's a 12-month MBA, AACSB accredited, but the idea is that every course basically is developed from this point of view, and it's done in 12 months with a required practicum in company or in venture. We got our first cohort there this year, so it's actually kind of exciting. So the whole thing's dedicated to exactly the kind of sustainable business that I've just described. If you're interested, I'd be happy to give you more information. So that's it, and that's by way of kind of general intro, and now I'd like to invite the panelists, please, to come on up, because we have three, I think, really exciting ventures, and please.
For that great context, and really looking forward to this panel to get reactions from both the companies as well as DFID. So just to introduce the panel, it's Genichiro Shimada, who's the General Manager of International Relations Group for Panasonic Corporation, Raman Ramachandra, Chairman and Managing Director of BASF, Bart Hartman, the Founder and Chief Entrepreneur of Knott's Impact Enterprises, and Liz Ditchburn, Policy Director of UK DFID. So I'll turn it over to Stuart.
Great. So what we're going to do is we'll hear from the three ventures, first, as I mentioned, and we'll do them kind of one at a time. So we'll hear first from Panasonic, and then there'll be a little bit of conversation that we'll have, and then we'll go down the line that way. Then we'll hear from Liz, and then we'll open it up. So that'll be the way. So please.
Thank you very much for introduction. So my name is Genichiro Shimada from Panasonic. It is a very great pleasure and honor to be here to share our idea or initiative with you. So Panasonic is a Japanese comprehensive electronic manufacturer founded in 1918. So our business philosophy is to contribute to the progress and development of society and well-being of the people through our business activities. This philosophy is very much with the concept of the business call to action, I believe. So this one. So our initiative is to sell the Panasonic solar lantern to the areas outside of the grid. So the Panasonic solar lantern is a very high performance and high durability product because we have a lot of technologies related to these products, such as the technology of the solar panels, storage batteries, and LED lighting with high-level quality control. So by using this Panasonic solar lantern, the people can stop using the kerosene lamps for lighting, whose smoke may harm human health, and whose flames sometimes cause fires. And of course, we can reduce the CO2 emissions by using these products. So we have estimated that 30,000 tons of CO2 can be reduced by selling 1 million solar lantern over 5 years. So children can study at night by using this lantern. Of course, people can work or do housework at night. And this product can be utilized for the medical treatment in night. Of course, lighting prevents some crimes. So we believe this product is very meet the MDGs. But we now just selling this product, but we are facing many challenges. Regarding the delivering this product to the people who really need it. So last session, people talking about the last 1 mile, but 1 mile is too short, maybe last 10 miles or something. We have difficulties in delivering the solar lanterns. Of course, Panasonic has conventional sales channels in Africa and Asia, but these sales channels doesn't work well for this product because our sales channel is like a retailer distributor, like a supermarket. So the people who need these products is not going to supermarkets way. And furthermore, now people have not so confidence about these products due to some poor quality products, so the people don't trust the solar lantern. So we need to communicate the consumer, let them know the benefits of our products, and let them trust our products. So we need to communication with customers. So we need more new type of the sales channels for these products. And one more thing is there are many conflicts in the world now. So there are many refugees. The number of the refugees increase. So we think they really needed the lighting, not only water and food, but lighting they are needed. So we would like to deliver this product to them, but as a private company, it is almost impossible to deliver them to this product. So we have a delivery program here also. So we need to do something with help with other people. So this is a chart of the sales channel. So our traditional sales channel doesn't work so well. We need to establish or create a new sales channel with partnership with inclusive business partners. So maybe we can work together with the NPOs or NGOs or social entrepreneurs or other institutions. So the foods knows very well about consumers or social problems or so the market needs. But problem is that there is no sole answer or solution. So the circumstances of the market is very different from each country or each region. So we need to find out the new sales channel one by one. So we need to accumulate many of the new sales channel to make a business big. So I think that's the key for our inclusive business to how to make that kind of sales channels as soon as possible. And of course, like refugees, so we need help from the government or international organizations or NPO or NGOs. We are now working with IOM, an international organization of refugees. So we are providing our solar lantern to the Somalia refugee camps. So this is the last slide. So this is a kind of chart of the business cycle. So business cycle is very needed. So we would like to add a new sales channel and step by step, and we would like to establish a new business model with larger numbers. And maybe we can scale up our business. So thanks to the scale of economy, maybe we can make our money for new investment. So as I said, so the Panasonic is a comprehensive electronics manufacturer. We would like to develop and produce a new products for these markets. So maybe we can, after we introduce a new product, so we would like to again do this cycle, so the new sales channels and scale up. And so doing like this business cycle, so we can make a sustainable business model for these markets. So anyway, we need the many partnership or the many places. So we'd like to work the many people to grow this business model. This concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your interest.
So, Junichiro, thank you. A couple of questions.
Yes.
And please, the panel can chime in too. First of all, where have you started? So in terms of launching this business, has it been launched out there in the world somewhere? Have you chosen a particular place to start?
Yeah, so we are selling these products at some of the countries. So in Asia, we were focused on the Myanmar first, and Cambodia and Indonesia and other countries. In Africa, we are just selling this product in Kenya because there are many NPO or NGO or so microfinance institution is ready in Kenya, I think.
Yeah. And have you had different experiences in those different places? In other words, has it gone better in one place than another so far?
It depends on the partnership, I think. So we can find out a very good donor in the Myanmar. So they are working with many NPOs in that area, so we can succeed in the Myanmar. And but we in Kenya, so we have many challenges. So like logistics. So we are not good at logistics in Kenya, or different rule between our conventional sales company and Kenya, because our sales company have many rules to control the market, but that kind of rule do not fit this kind of business. So we are conflict or argument between company. What we need to do new thing for this market, but some people said no, this is not suitable for our current rule. Such kind of thing.
So in some places, it's been more of a donor-based model, but in other places, you're developing it on a commercial basis as a business?
Yes.
So you have different models of how you're trying to get this out there?
Yeah, so we are making a donation also, so
Yeah.
many countries, we have a program of the 100,000 donation program in the world. But 100,000 is a very small number if we think about the people living in the non-grid areas. And as I said, so the donation is a kind of the limit. We would like to make the business model, sustainable business model to deliver these products to many people.
Right.
Yes.
Does the donor model potentially interfere with trying to create a viable business model?
We cannot do so strategically. Maybe we need to do more strategic. So introducing the product by donation and knowing, let people know our products, and then we introduce the product in that area. That would be good strategy, but currently we cannot do so well, but we would like to do so.
And from a commercial point of view, in the places where you've tried to do it as a business, how has that gone so far? Even where you think a strong partner, how has it worked? Has there been acceptance? Have customers made purchase decisions to buy these lanterns? How is it going?
I think I hope so. They know they understand the quality of our product, and they can spread the reputation, and people buy our products. So I think it's going to well now, but it's just started. So we have to see that.
Right, but you sense you really need to expand it in a substantial, both in terms of the number of partners, but also maybe the nature of the offerings beyond just the one offering that you have. Liz had a question.
Yeah, no, I'd really like to ask a question. It's fantastic to hear about your work with these technologies. I kind of feel like everywhere I go, I hear interesting examples around these solar technologies, and often at the household level. And yesterday we were hearing about Mkopa, which is a startup business in Kenya, which is working with pay-as-you-go business models, with people paying through mobile money transfer. And I'm just interested to know, are you all kind of aware of all the different things that are going on, the different models that people are experimenting with? And is this sort of competitive tension interfere with collaboration, and how do you perceive that?
So you mean we need many collaboration ways. So as you said, so people have a mobile home, and they have to charge the mobile home. So maybe we can work together for the mobile home, the producer or providers, how do I say? So we can work with NPO for the healthcare. So the clinic, they need writing. So they need this kind of product. So we can work together with many kinds of NPO or NGOs. So that's working very well with the people living in that area. So maybe it's not a good answer to that.
Thank you.
Yes, it's okay.
Maybe add to that. I think it's great that a larger company is getting into space, because until now, many smaller companies, and sometimes they lacked capital. We are also in the solar lamp business, in the distribution, and we have to pay when the container with lamps leaves China. So I think that's because these companies don't have the capital to give us normal payment conditions. So I think it's great that a company like yours is getting into it. But I'm wondering, listening to you, that you are inventing a number of wheels that have been invented already by Barefoot and D-Light and all the other ones. So I don't know what's your ambitions, but I would think a more logical strategy would be that you buy one of these companies and that you can accelerate the whole thing rather than doing the same thing.
Yeah, so I know, so there are many suppliers for the solar lantern, and so like a D-Light, so that they are producing the very good quality products. But competition is needed for the market, I think. So we can compete the D-Light, and we would like to make a better quality product than them. So that's a kind of the good competition rule for the market. So even for the inclusive business or BOP markets, we think competition is very good. So if we buy the many small suppliers, so the innovation must be slowed or stopped, we think.
Right, so your challenge is, yes, the quality of the product and the price of the product makes a big difference, but you're discovering there's a lot more to it than that, right? So what as you say, the D-Lights and the Barefoots and the others that have been out there for a while have developed this kind of on the ground, kind of bottom up capability, partners, how do you actually make the case with a user? That's what you guys are struggling with now. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yes, yeah.
So it becomes, it's really more the social technology piece of it than the actual technology of the device itself.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, maybe one more thing. So I would like to talk about the difference between the D-Light.
Yeah.
So D-Light is dedicated to the solar light lamp to oneself, but we have Panasonic is a big company, and we can change the product, or we can utilize the know-how to introduce more different new products.
Yeah.
So we can differentiate the business model with we would like to continue to provide new service or new technology to the BOP market.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll come back. Let's give him a hand. Huh? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Norman, please.
Thank you, Professor. Is that moving?
There we
Okay.
go.
So first of all, it's a great privilege to be here. I represent a company by name BASF, which is a multinational company headquartered in Germany. I just want to set facts straight here. I'm not the chairman of the whole company. I'm only responsible for the business in South Asia, which is India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. We're about a $100 billion company, and actually what we contribute is less than 2%. So the topic that I'm going to be talking about is the conventional wisdom, as you pointed out, is for any multinational company, particularly in an emerging market, you look at the affluent and the middle class, and I've kind of segmented this pyramid even a little bit more than what you have shown here. But around 2010, 2011, as we were developing our growth strategy for South Asia, as was pointed out in the earlier session, we recognized that we cannot really ignore this large population that is aspiring middle class and the subsistence level part of the society. So we actually dedicated resources which started looking into what opportunities exist in this, and whether through our power of innovation we can actually contribute and create business models which will generate revenue here. Through a number of discussions with various stakeholders, NGOs, even village immersion tours that a number of our executives actually did, and through dialogues with research institutions and governments, we identified three broad areas where we could really focus on. One is the area of housing, health and hygiene, and food and farming. BASF, by the way, is a company which has got extremely diverse business. We go from very basic commodity chemicals all the way to very high-end chemicals which are used in automobiles and electronics. And the other thing that you should also, it's probably worth mentioning here, is that we have a stated purpose which says we create chemistry for a sustainable future, because we believe that chemistry is an enabler for a lot of the challenges that is going to come up in future. So just a couple of examples which are perhaps the more successful examples of this initiative has been, and this also goes to how really having a deep dialogue with the value chain players in a particular segment can give you interesting ideas about how you can use your existing technologies. And the example is the housing area, where in India there is a lot of housing projects which is looking at slum clearance projects and housing for economically weaker sections of the society. And through the deep conversation that we had with people involved in this, we found out that couple of the very key criteria that they're looking for is how can they do this in a very, very fast manner, and how can they also do it with labor that really is not very highly skilled in terms of mixing concrete, etc. And we have a product in our portfolio which is called as the Smart Dynamic Concrete, which is actually used for very high-end construction. These are used for tunneling, and these are used for very high-rise buildings like the ones that you see here. And we found out that this actually gives a lot of the benefits that this particular segment was looking for. And since 2011, this product is actually being used in 22 slum development projects across India. So here is an example of a very, very high-value, high-tech product that is, going in for a much for needs of this section of the society, so to speak. The other example worth mentioning is also we work with some manufacturers to produce some very economic and effective beauty care and personal products which are sold through women's self-help groups, women's entrepreneurs called Bachat Ghat, and they then sell to salons where women primarily are providing and become the women's entrepreneurs. But perhaps the most successful and the most impactful project that we have had so far is what we call as the Samruddhi. Samruddhi is a term from the ancient Indian language Sanskrit, which stands for prosperity. And this is targeted at the soybean farmers in the middle of India. There is about 11 million hectares of soybean that is cultivated in India, and soybean is a source of edible oil. India is not self-sufficient in edible oil, so it is very important to increase the productivity of soybeans, but unfortunately the soybean productivity in India is perhaps one of the lowest in the world. Actually the productivity about 3-4 years ago, about 10 years ago was about a third of the world average. So we have about 11 million hectares and a large number of farmers, and about 7-8 years ago as we started looking into this market as a target customer for some of our agri-input products, we realized that a single biggest need gap in this farming society was really authentic, reliable information about how do you grow this crop better and how do you make it more economical. So knowing this, we actually then changed our strategy. A conventional strategy of a company like ours would be to focus on distribution and focus on selling products, and we completely changed this, and we said, our focus is going to be really providing solution and also educating the farmer. So we developed nearly a large pool of highly trained agronomists who focused on really better farming practices and better farm economics. There was a vested interest here because we knew that if they adopted better farming practices, some of our inputs would actually work much better. So you can see this was actually starting from even educating the farmers, simple things like how do you space your plants when you put them in the ground, to selecting healthy seeds and treating those seeds which can provide tremendous benefit in the early stages of the crop, all the way to harvesting it and taking it to the mandi, as they call it, or the marketplace, and how to actually get better prices because of having better quality produce. We used, after we had been in this for about 6-7 years, we actually used PricewaterhouseCoopers, public audit agency, to actually come in and measure the impact of what we have been doing. And here is the results that the participating farmers in this program had an incremental yield of about 25%, and their net returns increased to almost close to about 40%. So this came from a very public survey. And what is more interesting is how did farmers or the farming families use this incremental earnings that they got from this program. And you can see here that a large proportion of the farmers used a large proportion of that incremental earnings for better livelihood by investing into better education for their children, better food, and better medicines for the family. And the second most important thing is the second biggest bucket was they actually used it for short-term and longer-term infrastructure building within their farms, so they could actually improve their own. So they invested into better seeds. They even started buying tractors and investing into better irrigation facilities. So this is BOP1, by the way, but the BOP2 is really, we went back in and BASF has developed some sustainability measuring tools. One of our earliest tools is what we call as eco-efficiency analysis, which are actually being used in chemical plants to measure the efficiency with which chemical plants operated. We used the eco-efficiency analysis, and there was a much more advanced version that has been developed specifically for agriculture called the Ag Balance tool, where we measure 69 parameters and then really come up with something like a sustainability index. And it's not an absolute measure, it is something that allows you to compare different production systems. And it also allows you to identify what are those factors which can actually improve the sustainability of production system. And we have applied that on these program farmers, and we find that they are actually about 20% more efficient than the conventional farming, the approaches that are taken. One, purely because there is much higher productivity that happens. But what is more important is we have also been able to identify very simple areas where if you make changes, the sustainability can even become better. For example, fertilization. Farmers tend to fertilize irrespective of what is the soil health is. So a simple thing like making soil testing and the report available and making them understand how to fertilize based on that would improve the sustainability index of this production system even further. So that's the kind of next thing that, and more importantly, we also realize that when you actually impart any kind of education to the farming families, they don't tend to adopt it, and there is a lot of wisdom in them, and they tend to kind of modify that. And this is one of our new learnings also. How do we actually marry whatever we have with the wisdom that already exists in the rural parts of many of these countries. So that's, and I want to really end with, we do get recognized for this. Last year in India, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs and the German institution called GTZ actually released a compendium of responsible engagement in rural India. And this particular program actually featured as one good example out of about 5 or 6 examples that came out. And so it's been worthwhile doing this. I must also say that with a humble beginning of about 100 agronomists and targeting about 25,000 farmers, in 2013 we had about 1,000 agronomists working across India and targeting about 250,000 farmers on an annualized basis, providing this kind of education and improving the farming practices. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's very exciting. Could we also get you to speak a little bit to the business side as well?
Yes.
Which would be great,
yeah,
because we have a sense of how
have,
it's scaling with the farmers,
yeah.
and how does that interweave with the the business objectives.
So it's very clear that any commercial organization like ours, if there is not a strong business behind this, all this would not have been possible, because there is tremendous amount of investment that goes into training those agronomists and having 1,000 people on ground for any multinational company. It doesn't matter whether it is in India or in Europe, it's a headcount. So we do have a business of close to about 80 to 90 million US dollar, which is primarily selling a lot of our inputs from biological seed treatment agents, which enhance nitrogen fixation, to herbicides. So yes, there is a very strong business which rests on this foundation.
So net, it's a project the company would want to actually invest in and expand, even looking at it through a financial lens.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in fact, we say samruddhi, which is, as I said, prosperity. Yeah. So samruddhi for the farmers, prosperity for BSF for the company, and in some ways even for the country, because we are improving productivity and probably reducing the amount of edible oil that needs to be imported. And for a country like India, which is always struggling with current account deficit, any such hard currency outflow that can be reduced is a great contribution. So.
Yeah. So it's interesting, I think, as you tell the story, one of the things that comes through to me, and I think one of the things we've found is that in building these types of business models, it's so important for the value proposition to be wide and compelling.
Yeah.
Right? In other words, Our natural tendency, and it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on this too, I mean, it's more of a device, whereas, right, I mean, well, you could have viewed it as just selling inputs, as you said.
Yeah.
But you kind of expanded the kind of the bandwidth on how you would even imagine that business. And the value proposition is much wider, right? I mean, what you're really, from the farmer's point of view, you've changed their lives in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference. So that the value proposition is more than the value that's just embedded in the input you're selling them. It's actually changed their life in a wider sense.
Yeah. So it's one thing is change. It's really changed the lives of a lot of people. And I must also say here, we actually have a program within the company for this group of people who manage the ag business, and it's called We Change Lives. And here, these agronomists who are out there, they actually send us stories, and at the end of the year, we select the top 50 stories and bring those people in on how they've changed the lives of these farming families. So you can also see here, these people are highly motivated because this is what keeps them going. Yeah.
This is one of our struggles and challenges, I think, in this territory, is that sometimes the value proposition, like for a solar lantern or whatever it might be, is clear to us.
Yes, but not to the...
Right, but if it's not clear on the other, if it doesn't have the pull because it's viewed as fundamentally kind of changing people's lives from their point of view, then it doesn't have commercial traction.
Yeah.
So you find that in your
Absolutely.
case.
In this particular case, I'm not sure if you will always be able to find this in all the kind of business cases, but this one is unique in the sense that it has been able to, the number of touch points which it has a positive impact is more than one.
Yeah. Do any of the panelists have a question for Raman? Are we ready to hear from Bart?
Lunch is waiting.
Oh, Raman, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Please, Bart.
My name is Bart Hartman. I'm a Dutch entrepreneur and founder of NOTS Impact Enterprises. It's an honor to be here and to get the opportunity to tell you about a simple concept that could have a huge impact on sub-Saharan Africa. Impact enterprises are companies that have making a positive impact on society and environment as their primary goal, while realizing a financially sustainable return. We are in two businesses, both in renewable energy, sales and distribution of solar lamps, and sustainable charcoal production. Sustainable charcoal might sound a bit weird to you. That's exactly why Business Call to Action asked me to tell you a bit more about it. And first of all, I would like to show you a short video on what we call blue charcoal.
What do you know about charcoal? It's that dirty energy source from the past, right? Yet, in sub-Saharan Africa, it is used for cooking in 70% of households and employs 10 million people, making it a very important source of energy. But producing charcoal causes deforestation, high levels of greenhouse gas emissions, and charcoal producers earn very little. What if we could take a big step in saving our planet and make charcoal production sustainable? NOTS, together with Wageningen University, has developed a solution, which we call blue charcoal, because it benefits the environment and the people producing it. This is how it works. We use innovative low-cost ovens to make charcoal production more efficient. We plant fast-growing trees to use as feedstock for charcoal instead of cutting down existing forests. We grow cash crops in between the trees, making communities less dependent on just charcoal income. And we set up a distribution system to ensure that everyone benefits, and not just the traders. The investment capital required will be earned back within 6 years. And this is not theory. It's a proven concept that we've tested in Mali for 3 years. If we start today, we can turn charcoal production blue by 2025. But we can't do this alone. We need governments to take action and partners to implement it in more than 30 countries. What role will you play? Visit knots.nl to learn more about how impact enterprises are solving the big social and environmental problems.
Then I would like to take you at a bit more detail in the problem, in our solution, and what you could contribute to implement the solution. Oh, how I get back to the... here. 80% of the people in cities in sub-Saharan Africa cook on charcoal, about 300 million people. And this charcoal is produced in the villages around these cities. Trees are cut, and then a hole is digged, the wood goes into the hole, clay is going over it, and then the carbon process start, and it takes about 11 days to produce a batch of charcoal. This is the current way how charcoal is produced, but it has a number of problems. First of all, it's inefficient, because you need 7 kilos of wood for 1 kilo of charcoal. And it takes about 11 days to produce one batch. Secondly, it's dirty. The emissions of methane are estimated by the World Bank to be 240 million tons of CO2 equivalents, just in sub-Saharan Africa per year. It's about the same emission of half of all the cars here in the US. And the third problem with current charcoal production is deforestation, because no new trees are planted. In Mali, where we started our operations, people have to go out for 7 kilometers to find trees, and every year the distance is growing. To solve this problem, we have developed what we call the blue charcoal solution. It has 4 elements. First of all, efficient production. We use an oven for that you can construct with local bricks. It's about 3 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 1 meter high. And instead of 7 kilos of wood, you only need 3.5 kilos of wood for 1 kilo of charcoal. And it reduces the carbon emissions by 75%. And it takes only 3 days to produce a batch instead of 11 days. The second element is planting fast-growing trees. After 4 years, you can prune these trees and use them as feedstock for the ovens. And then you don't have to cut trees from the natural forest anymore. The third element is agroforestry, planting food crops in between these fast-growing trees. And we do that for 2 reasons. First of all, these trees and the food crops have a positive effect on each other, because the trees give shade to the food crops and the leaves feed the soil. The second reason is that the revenues of the food crop increase the revenues of the charcoal producers and also diversify their income. The fourth element of our solution is distribution. At the moment, traders who pick up the charcoal at the villages earn a disproportional part of the value that's created in the chain. They use the trucks, which is a scarce resource in most developing countries. That's their strength. What we want to do is that the charcoal producers get a larger part of the value created to get also involved in the distribution of blue charcoal, of branded blue charcoal. To implement this solution and to reach our goal, have all charcoal production in sub-Saharan Africa sustainable by 2025, we need 4 things. First of all, a methodology. The methodology we have tested that for 3.5 years in Mali, and it works. What we don't have is awareness among governments. The government in Mali and also in Rwanda realized that charcoal production in the current way is not sustainable. But other governments don't realize that. And that's because governments hoped for a long time, or expected, that charcoal as a cooking fuel would be replaced by gas. But it didn't happen, because gas is too expensive. People are used on cooking on charcoal and don't see a reason to change to gas. And most African countries don't have gas itself, so then they become reliant on importing gas. And for the same reason, the transition to gas will not happen in the next 20 years. consensus is starting to build that that will not happen. Actually, the consumption of charcoal in the next 20 years will only increase. And so, therefore, the production of charcoal has to increase because of the urbanization. So governments have to become aware of this. And that's the second element for realizing this goal. The third element is 100 million euros capital to construct these retorts, to purchase seedlings for the trees, purchase fertilizer, and give support to charcoal producers. 100 million euro might sound a lot, but if you heard yesterday about the new fund that is created, a 50 billion fund, dollars, or the money that has been committed by the EU for the rebuilding Mali, 3.2 billion euros, then 100 million to realize this goal, sustainable charcoal production in sub-Saharan Africa, I don't think it's a lot. And the last thing we need is an organization to roll out blue charcoal in sub-Saharan Africa. There are about 50 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, but if you realize that 75% of the consumption of charcoal, and therefore also the production of charcoal, is happening in 15 countries, it becomes quite a manageable task. But we cannot do this alone. Not as only a small organization. So we want to invite you to partner with us. And we need particularly governments in Africa to become aware of the problem and also to become aware of the solution and to adapt their regulations and their tax system to facilitate the transition from non-sustainable charcoal production to sustainable charcoal production. We need the UN, the World Bank, and NGOs to raise the awareness among the governments in Africa, to provide part of the funding, and to utilize their underground infrastructure and experience to implement sustainable charcoal production. And we need investors to provide the remaining part of the capital required. Underneath blue charcoal, there is a business model that allows investors to realize not only a social and environmental return, but also a healthy financial return. If you think you can contribute something, and hopefully you got a bit excited, please send an email to blue@nots.nl and we will connect with you to discuss how together we can make charcoal production in sub-Saharan Africa sustainable. Thank you.
Wow. Bart, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of questions are bubbling through my head, you know, and probably everyone here. It's exciting. But I guess the first question I would have is, can you start small? Right? In other words, you've just laid out a huge, you know, Pan-Africa strategy on a large scale, but can this be put into play on a modular basis? Put it on the ground. In other words, what's the on-the-ground
no, that's actually what we are.
Business model with real people and that sort of thing?
No, that's actually what we are doing. We started off in Mali 3 and a half years ago. We just started in Rwanda, where we built 5 of these ovens, retorts.
Yeah.
And building a retort cost about $1,200 each. So it's a modular thing. You can, in Mali, to make all charcoal production in Mali sustainable, we need about 3,000 of what we call blue charcoal packages, consisting of one of these ovens, 15 hectares of agroforestry. And so you can...
Which means kind of recruiting local farmers and, you know, people in the community to become involved in that venture.
Yeah, we approach charcoal producing communities, introduce the concept to them, and they love these ovens because they only need half of the wood. That saves time or cost. The time to produce one batch is only 3 days compared to 11 days.
Yep.
So they love it. And they are demanding that we provide them with these ovens. What is a bit more tricky is growing the new trees, because it takes 4 years. So we have been thinking about a model that we both give incentives to proper take care of the trees, but also to penalties if they don't do that.
Right, so there's a bit of a startup window, right, to get to the point where you've actually got a source of the raw material
Yeah.
to begin with.
Yeah,
That's
in the
a
beginning, in the first
little
4
bit of a
years,
chicken and the egg problem.
during the first 4 years, you still have to cut wood from the natural forest.
Yeah.
But there's only 50% of what
Yeah.
it was before, so that's already an improvement.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing about this is we were talking about this a little bit before the session, that you have parallel to this the whole clean cook stove, and the world is littered with failed clean cook stove ventures, for a whole variety of reasons. But one of them is that just like with solar lanterns, right? It's different, right? I mean, cooking with charcoal is a traditional way of cooking, and cooking with clean cook stoves is different.
Yeah, that's
So you're not changing the downstream. People are still cooking with charcoal, right? So there's pull through. It's easy. You don't have to change anybody's mind on the purchasing end.
Now, and what we are actually having discussions with the Clean Cooking Stove Alliance, because they have some issues on reaching their targets, because these clean cooking stoves are more expensive than traditional cooking stoves. So what we are thinking about is creating a kind of Gillette system that you sell clean cooking stoves at the same price as non-clean cooking stove, and that you use the lower cost of our way of producing charcoal for making a sound business model. So you're kind of subsidizing the cooking stoves, and you earn it back on the charcoal, so that we could both reach the goal.
Because it's not it's both and, right? That, because we were talking about Clean Star, right? They're a clean cook stove, but they're not looking to replace charcoal cooking. It's a complement to it, right?
Yeah, it would be better if everybody would switch to solar cooking, but that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and then you can say, okay, it should happen,
Right.
but then still deforestation continues, emissions continue. So I think the only solution is, at least for the next 20 years, to make charcoal production more sustainable.
That's interesting. So last question, and I'll let the panelists chime in here if you would be interested to do so. Why do you need the governments involved?
For the awareness, because there is in Mali and also in Rwanda, there is a regulatory system around charcoal production. So that with licenses, they're not effective, but there are actually barriers for going towards sustainable charcoal. So that's why we need governments. And in Rwanda, for example, you cannot just introduce this resource because it's a new thing. So the government wants to check, is it a proper method, and it doesn't lead to a worse situation. So there we need governments.
Got it. Any questions, Pam? We're set, huh? Good. Thank you. That was wonderful. Appreciate it. So, Liz, I'm wondering if we could turn to you and just kind of offer some reflections both on what you've heard, but also what, kind of how DFID is thinking about this.
Let me go there as well.
Yep, please.
But this is going to be a PowerPoint-free zone.
Yeah.
This week, in the Unger Week, I think many of us who've been involved in this business for a long time have detected a shift, or two shifts actually, I would say. One is around the way in which we think about climate change and development. And I think, it really does feel like the moment has come where we all accept that we can no longer think about development and climate change as separate things. They are absolutely interlinked, and we will not achieve development if we don't tackle climate change, and we will not tackle climate change without bringing development into that piece. So I think it feels like there's just, many people, of course, have known that for a long time and have been saying it, but there just comes these moments where you reach that watershed where I think that's then accepted. And the other thing that we've been talking a lot about, and a recurring theme of some of the meetings that I've been in, is the concept and the nature of the global partnership that we're going to need to deliver that set of addressing those twin challenges of development and climate change. And that global partnership needs to bring in everybody. I came this morning from a session with a whole bunch of scientists from the UK Met Office, from the US in terms of data. The US has just made a whole range of new data available. And the role of scientists in thinking about understanding climate risk and getting that information into the hands of policymakers. Absolutely fantastic example. And here talking about businesses. And whoever it is, it feels like these are the challenges that we need to work on together. There are roles for governments, there are roles for civil society, there are absolutely roles for business. It's fantastic to be here in terms of the business call to action, and there are roles for academia, scientists, everybody. And it's all of our business, and it's for all of us. Because if we don't tackle these challenges, we will be living in a less stable, a less prosperous world, which is not going to be any good for any of us. So I think that kind of sense of why we all need to be working together is really critical. So I work for an organisation whose mission is poverty reduction. And again, we've known for a long time that growth is ultimately how we're going to reduce poverty and eliminate poverty. But the quality of that growth matters. And we've thought for a long time about the quality of that growth in terms of inclusiveness. I used to work, when I worked 10 years ago in Tanzania, and at the time, you know, the jargon changes. At the time, we talked about pro-poor growth, and that was the area I worked on. And we were looking particularly at the kind of ways in which growth transmits through into poverty reduction. And of course, we know that a lot of people are often left outside of those processes, and particularly the people at the bottom of the pyramid we're talking about now, many of whom are girls and women. We also spend a lot of time talking about green growth and talking about low carbon growth paths. And again, you know, we've known some of that stuff for a long time, but the evidence and the momentum is building up more and more. And the publication of the recent report, New Climate Economy, I think is really interesting because it starts to show that we don't need to think about these things as competing tensions, that low carbon growth can be the kind of growth that we all need, and that's not just an extra cost. So in that context of working on those kinds of issues on growth, those of us in the development, I'm a development practitioner, those of us in the development business have obviously been spending a long time, many years, talking to businesses. But we used to have conversations that were mostly with your CSR departments. And frankly, those were less than, you know, they were interesting conversations, but they were not that interesting because it was always just at the margins. It was just a tiny thing that you were doing on top of everything that you were, you know, your main business. And so inevitably, when you talk about something at the margins, you're not going to have a big impact. But what we've been doing over the last few years, I think, is having very different conversations with business. And they're much, much more interesting conversations about core business models and about the with the CEOs rather than the conversations with the CSR leads. And those conversations, you know, we each have insights to share with the other. We know a lot about how societies operate and about how you can think about some of the social technologies. I spent my early professional life working on some of the stuff that matters to you in terms of agricultural research. So there's a whole set of things that we know about. We know a lot about politics and about how governments operate. I'm sure businesses do too, but you know, we each bring our own insights. And you bring a whole range of insights that we don't tend to have. We tend to be in government. Government's great at some things, not great at others. And the conversations that we have when we each bring our knowledge to the table, I think, have been the most fascinating. There's really no area of development where you can not think about the private sector. We've heard about the sort of supply chain examples, bringing smallholders into supply chains, which absolutely matters and makes commercial sense for businesses. We work in the UK a lot on low-cost private schooling in developing countries because actually the private sector can generate some of the most affordable education, and that's really changing the market in many countries. We're talking to businesses about the kind of risks that they face, so conversations with, say, SAB Miller around water supply. And you know, these are the conversations that I think are really the ones that interest me, because they're the ones that have the possibility of making a big difference. So what does the UK policy look like in terms of economic development and growth, and these kinds of both inclusive and green growth that we're talking about here? Well, I think the first big thing to say is, you know, for us as the government, really recognising the role of business and recognising the importance of the private sector in development. The UK has a very strong policy on economic development. You can find it on our website, .gov.uk. I won't say any more about that, but actually just recognising that and putting it centre stage and saying that's how we're going to work, I think, is a really important step. And the sorts of things we're doing. So what's the role of government and what can we be doing, and what are the kind of conversations and things that we want to have? So we invest our money in a lot of the things that matter to you. So we invest our money in the human capital in the countries that we're talking about today, developing countries, whether it's in health and education. We invest our money in some of the physical infrastructure that you need. But we invest our money as well in lots of things around the broader enabling environment, whether it's better governance, whether it's better regulation, or the international environment in which business operates. We're also very directly co-investing with some businesses and sharing risks. So thinking about, there's kind of a whole range of schemes, which again you can find on the website, that I won't talk about in detail, but exploring those areas where some level of public support can enable a business idea to take off, or where pushing at the frontiers of the markets that you may not be quite comfortable going into, but where we can underwrite some of that risk and work with you. So lots of ways in which we do that. We're also really interested in harnessing the power of entrepreneurship and innovation for development outcomes. So yesterday, our UK Secretary of State, Justine Greening, launched together with Raj Shah from USAID, the Global Innovation Fund, which is a new fund which is going to be looking at how we can take public money, and whether it's through grants, through equity, through debt, support businesses to develop ideas that will generate development outcomes. And of course, we invest in some of the global public goods that really matter to you as well, whether it's the norms and standards or whether it's the agricultural research and the technology that can change some of the opportunities for businesses. So maybe just sort of, so that's a massive set of things that we're doing. And as I say, I think you just can't, you know, the world we live in is a world where the public and the private sectors need to work together, and none of us can work in isolation. So it's just our core business to be thinking about this and to be talking to people like those of you in this room here. Maybe two personal reflections from me. For us as an organisation and for us as individuals working in the development business, I think sometimes we need to learn to let go a bit. We're quite used to a world where we have, you know, we call them logical frameworks. It's a pretty awful term, but, you know, it sort of sets out, here's the money, this is what's going to happen, and it goes through all the logical steps. And of course, the world's a bit of a messier place than that. And when we're working with you and understanding markets and understanding how businesses might make a difference, we're not going to be in a world where we can neatly write it all down and predict in advance what's going to happen. So maybe we need to be a bit more comfortable with that kind of uncertainty. But my challenge for you, I guess, is to say, what kind of businesses do you want to be? Do you want to be the sort of businesses that are just in and out for the short return? Or do you want to be the sorts of businesses that have a broad value proposition, as you talked about? And whether you're motivated to have that broader value proposition just on the basis of, you know, managing some of your long-term risks, or whether you're motivated by an intrinsic set of values that you think are important to you, I think the potential is absolutely huge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. I think in the interest of time and lunch, we should probably bring the session to a close. So let's thank our panelists once again, and we'll have lunch.